My son didn't answer when the paramedics called him. Not because he didn't hear the phone. He heard it. He just looked at the screen, saw my name, and set it face down on the bar. I know this because the bartender told me later. Said my son glanced at it, shrugged, and ordered another round for the table. Said the whole group laughed about something right after. Said nobody looked worried at all. I was on the kitchen floor of my own house, with the left side of my face drooping and my right hand clawing at the linoleum trying to reach the counter. And my son was doing shots at a steakhouse 40 minutes away because his wife's sister was getting married next month. And apparently, that called for a celebration that couldn't wait. My name is Walter Briggs. I'm 64 years old. I spent 31 years building custom homes across central Tennessee with nothing but a work truck, a set of tools I bought on credit, and a willingness to outwork every man on every job site I ever set foot on. I built the company from 1 crew to 14. I poured the concrete on foundations that are still standing. I framed walls with my own hands in 100-degree heat. I know what it means to earn something. All raid. And won. All raid. All raid. All raid. I also know now what it means to be discarded by the people you earned it for. But before I tell you how I made sure they understood the full cost of that decision, let me ask you something. If you've ever given everything to people who took it like it was owed to them, I want you to hit like and subscribe right now, because this story is for you. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It was a Thursday evening in late September. I remember because I had just gotten off a call with my accountant about the quarterly numbers. The business was doing well. Better than well. Actually, we'd landed a contract for a 12-unit townhome development that would carry us through the following spring. I hung up feeling the particular satisfaction of a man who has built something real. Something lasting. I was in the kitchen reheating leftover chili when it happened. No dramatic warning. No Hollywood clutching at the chest. My left hand just stopped cooperating. I reached for the cabinet door, and my fingers wouldn't close right. Then, the left side of my mouth went slack. I tried to say something out loud, some reflex to test whether I was imagining it, and what came out was a slurred, wet sound that didn't belong to me. I had watched my father have a stroke when I was 19. I knew exactly what this was. I got to my phone through sheer stubbornness, crawled to the counter, and got myself upright enough to hit the emergency dial. The dispatcher was calm and professional and told me to stay on the line. That help was already on the way. I tried to stay on, but there was one call I needed to make first. My son Derek is 38 years old. He works for my company. Has worked there for 11 years. I brought him in as a project manager when he was still figuring out what to do with himself. Gave him a salary that would have made my younger self laugh out loud. Gave him a truck. Gave him an expense account. I watched him grow into the role. I was proud of him, prouder than I probably ever told him. I dialed his number. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I called my daughter-in-law, Sandra. She picked up on the second ring, but the noise behind her was immediate and overwhelming. Music, voices, laughter, the clinking of glasses. "Walter," she said, and her voice had that particular flatness that meant I was an interruption. "Is something wrong?" "I need Derek," I said. I could hear how wrong my voice sounded even through the stroke. "Something's happening to me. I think it might be a stroke." There was a pause. Not a scared pause. An annoyed one. "Oh gosh," she said. "Really tonight?" "Really tonight," I repeated. I couldn't tell if I was more angry or more terrified. "Hang on," she said. I heard her say something to someone at the table. I heard laughter. Then I heard my son's voice somewhere in the background. Not alarmed. Just mildly inconvenienced. He said something I couldn't make out, and then Sandra came back on the line. "Derek says you're probably just overtired," she told me. "You've been working too much. Have you eaten? Low blood sugar can mimic stroke symptoms. Drink some juice and lie down. We'll check on you when we get home tonight." "My mouth isn't working right," I said. "My hand isn't working right. Please call 911 or come home." "Walter," she said. And now The annoyance had fully replaced any pretense of concern. "We are celebrating Kristen's bachelorette weekend. We drove 45 minutes to be here. We have a reservation we paid for months ago. I am not going to drag Derek out of this dinner because you have a headache." Then she delivered the line that I have replayed in my mind every single day since. She said, "And I want you to understand," she said this clearly, without hesitation, without a single tremor in her voice. "You've been looking for attention ever since Derek and I got busy with our own lives. This is exactly what you always do." Then she hung up. The paramedics found me 12 minutes later on the kitchen floor. One of them was a young woman who knelt right down next to me without hesitating and put her hand on my arm and said, "We have you, sir. We're going to take care of you." I don't know her name. I never got a chance to find out, but I've thought about her more times than I can count. Because in that moment, the kindness of a complete stranger was the only kindness there was. The ER doctor at Nashville General told me I had suffered what he called a moderate ischemic stroke. Not the catastrophic kind, but not a minor warning shot either. The left side weakness was real. The speech issues were real. I would need inpatient rehabilitation. I would need close monitoring. I would need someone present to make medical decisions if things deteriorated overnight. He asked me if my family had been notified. I told him they had. He looked at the empty chairs in the room and then looked at me, and to his credit, he didn't say anything. He just nodded and moved on. They admitted me at 9:17 that evening. The attending nurse on the floor, an older man named Roy with gray at his temples, got me settled and checked my phone for me since my left hand still wasn't cooperating. He confirmed that no one had called the hospital. He confirmed that no one had come in. I lay there in the fluorescent quiet of that room for a long time, staring at the ceiling. My wife, Caroline, had passed 3 years before from ovarian cancer. When she was in her final weeks, I had not left that hospital. I had slept in the chair next to her bed. I had held her hand through every difficult night. I had been there every single moment, until the very last one. Now I was alone in a hospital room, and my son was 40 minutes away at a steakhouse, and his wife had told me I was just looking for attention. Something shifted in me that night. Not broke. I want to be precise about that. It didn't break. It clarified. Like when you wipe a fogged window and suddenly the view is exactly what it always was. You just hadn't been able to see it clearly before. I thought about the last 3 years. I thought about how Derek and Sandra had moved into the guest suite of my house for 6 months after a flooding issue in their condo. How that 6 months had quietly become 2 years. How they had taken over the better parking spots, and the bigger refrigerator, and the living room TV schedule, and had never once offered to pay anything toward the mortgage or utilities. I thought about the company truck I'd given Derek that now had a dent in the rear panel that nobody had mentioned. I thought about the business credit card on which Sandra's salon charges had started appearing regularly, which Derek had explained away as client entertainment, which I had never pushed back on because I didn't want to be the difficult father. I thought about the vacation to Cabo they'd taken in February, the one I had quietly covered because Derek said cash was tight. I thought about the new kitchen appliances in the suite. I thought about the quiet way things I owned had been absorbed into their life without discussion. And I thought about a Thursday night in September when my left hand stopped working and my son set his phone face down on a bar and ordered another round. A man named Thomas Aldridge had been my attorney for 19 years. He had drafted my will. He had handled the legal structure of my company. He had helped me set up the family trust after Caroline passed. He was 71 years old, sharp as a tack, and one of exactly 4 people in my life I trusted without reservation. I called him at 11:47 that night. He answered on the second ring. "Walter," he said, and I could hear him sit up in bed. "The hospital already called me. How bad is it?" "I'm okay," I said. "Tom, I need you here in the morning. Bring the documents we talked about last year. The ones we drafted after Caroline died? The full restructure? All of it," I said. "The contingency file." He was quiet for a moment. "You're sure?" he said. "I spent today on a kitchen floor, Tom. My son was at dinner. My daughter-in-law told me I was looking for attention." Another pause. "I'll be there at 8, he said. He arrived at 8:02, wearing a jacket over a flannel shirt because he hadn't had time to change properly, which told me he'd driven straight from bed without stopping. He set his briefcase on the rolling table over my bed, and he looked at me for a long moment, and I could see him measuring something, gauging whether I was in shock, whether I was reacting emotionally in a way I'd regret. "I've never been clearer in my life," I told him before he could ask. He opened the briefcase. What he laid out across that table was a set of documents we had drafted 18 months earlier on a quiet afternoon when I'd had what I described to Tom as a realistic conversation with myself. It was the kind of document no father wants to create, the kind that assumes the worst about the people you love. At the time, I had hoped I'd never need it. The plan was this. Briggs Custom Homes would be transferred entirely into a new operating entity, a limited liability company held by an irrevocable trust. My personal assets, the primary house, the lake property in Cookville, the investment accounts, the retirement funds, everything would be consolidated under that trust. My name would remain on nothing that could be accessed, challenged, or attached by anyone claiming a family relationship. Every credit card Derek had access to through the company would be canceled. His salary would continue through the end of the current pay period and then terminate. His employment contract would be reviewed for cause. "I want one account left joint," I told Tom. "The household operating account. Leave it open and leave exactly $1 in it." Tom didn't flinch. He uncapped his pen. "I want him to know it was intentional," I said. Tom nodded and started filling in dates. There was one more thing I needed to do. I asked Roy, the night nurse, for a notepad and a pen. My right hand worked fine. My handwriting was clean and steady. I wrote a short note, folded it, and asked Roy to seal it in an envelope with my son's name on the front. I told him to hold it at the nurse's station and give it to the first family member who came asking for me. Roy looked at the envelope. "How long do you think it'll be before they show up?" he asked. I thought about Sandra's voice on the phone, the complete absence of anything resembling alarm. "My guess is they'll come when they need something signed," I said. Roy set the envelope under the counter. Tom completed the paperwork by noon. The transfers initiated that afternoon. The company accounts were restructured by close of business. I had arranged a temporary discharge to a private rehabilitation center on the east side of the city, one with a separate entrance, a facility that did not appear under my name in any public directory because it operated under a group practice license. By the time Derek and Sandra came looking for me, I would not be findable through normal channels. I want to tell you what that first evening in the rehabilitation center felt like. It was quiet. That was the main thing, not the heavy quiet of being alone and frightened. A different kind. The quiet of a decision that has been made and cannot be unmade. I sat in a chair by the window and watched the sun go down over a parking lot, and I felt something I had not felt in years. I felt like myself. Not Walter Briggs, the father, the soft touch, the man who had quietly absorbed every imposition without complaint because he couldn't bear the thought of his family being unhappy with him. Just Walter, the man who had built something from nothing with his own 2 hands. I slept better that night than I had in 3 years. Derek and Sandra arrived at Nashville General on a Saturday morning. I know the details of that visit because Roy had worked a double and was still on shift. And Roy had what I can only describe as a finely calibrated sense of justice. They walked in at 10:40 in the morning. 41 hours after my stroke, Sandra was wearing sunglasses indoors, the kind that announce you've made an effort to look put together. And she was carrying an iced coffee. Derek had his hands in his pockets. He didn't look like a man who'd spent 2 nights worried about his father. He looked like a man who'd been mildly inconvenienced. They asked the desk for Walter Briggs. Roy told them I had been discharged. Derek's face did something complicated. Not grief, not relief, confusion, and behind the confusion, the beginning of something like irritation. "Discharged," Derek repeated. "He just had a stroke." "You can't discharge someone after a stroke." "He discharged himself," Roy said. "He was evaluated, treated, and he left voluntarily, with private medical transport, to a follow-up facility. He left something for you." Roy produced the envelope. Sandra took it before Derek could. She tore it open and read it to herself, and I wish I could have seen her face in that moment because Roy told me it went through about 4 different expressions in about 4 seconds. She handed it to Derek without a word. Derek, read it. The note said 3 things. It said, I heard you on the phone Thursday night. You said I was looking for attention. I want you to know that the last thing I will ever do is ask for yours. It said, as of this week, your position at Briggs Custom Homes has been terminated. HR will contact you regarding your final check and the return of company property, including the truck. It said, the guest suite will need to be vacated within 30 days. The property management company handling the house will be in touch with the formal notice. Please, do not contact me directly. Derek read it twice. Then he pulled out his phone and called the company credit card line. The automated message told him the card had been reported as closed by the primary account holder. He called his personal bank. The joint access he had to the company operating account had been removed. His direct deposit from the previous Friday had been his last. He called my cell phone. Disconnected. He stood in the lobby of Nashville General with an iced coffee. Sandra was no longer drinking, and a note from a man he had written off on Thursday night. And he understood, perhaps for the first time in his adult life, that there are consequences that arrive without warning and without negotiation. Sandra recovered first. That was consistent with what I knew of her character. She grabbed Derek's arm and started talking fast and quiet. And I know from Roy's account that the word lawyer came up within about 90 seconds of her processing the situation. Let me tell you about the next 2 weeks, because they reveal something important about the kind of people we're talking about. Derek didn't call to apologize. He didn't try to reach me through Tom to explain himself. He didn't have a friend reach out, didn't write a letter, didn't do a single thing that a person who genuinely regretted their behavior might do. What he did instead was retain an attorney to contest the transfer of the business. His argument, and I want you to appreciate the creativity this required, was that I had made the business restructuring decisions while under the influence of stroke-related cognitive impairment. He submitted an affidavit from a doctor I had never met, a man who, based on a review of my initial hospital records and nothing else, concluded that I was experiencing significant neurological compromise and was therefore not competent to make major financial decisions at the time of the transfers. He was going to use my stroke to take my company, the same stroke he hadn't come to the hospital for. I want you to sit with that for a moment. Tom called me at the rehabilitation center with the news on a Wednesday afternoon. I was in the middle of an occupational therapy session, working on fine motor tasks with my left hand. I had progressed significantly. My therapist, a young woman named Angela who had zero patience for self-pity and an excellent instinct for when to push harder, had told me that morning that my recovery was remarkable for my age and the severity of the initial event. When Tom told me about the lawsuit, Angela watched my face and then quietly excused herself. I felt a long, cold stillness move through me. Tom, I said, did he actually file? Yesterday afternoon, Tom said. Emergency motion. He's asking for a temporary freeze on the business assets pending a competency hearing. How long do I have to respond? He wants the hearing in 3 weeks. There was a silence on the line. Good, I said. Tom hesitated. Harrison, he said, and then caught himself. Walter. Are you sure you want to fight this in court? We can handle it quietly. A private competency evaluation. An out-of-court settlement. We could resolve this without a hearing. I thought about Sandra on the phone Thursday night. I thought about 41 hours before they appeared at the hospital, and only then because they needed something. I don't want to resolve it quietly, Tom, I said. I want to resolve it completely. I need you to find something for me, I continued. Derek has been using the company card for personal expenses. He's been using the company name for personal projects. I need the full accounting. Every transaction over the last 2 years. I can have that for you in 10 days, Tom said. Good, I said. And Tom, I need you to hire a very good investigator. I want to know everything about Derek's personal finances for the last 24 months. Everything. Another pause. Consider it done, Tom said. What the investigator found in 2 weeks of work was not subtle. Derek had, over the course of the previous 2 years, been quietly redirecting small amounts from the company operating account into a personal account that Sandra controlled. Not large amounts at any one time. $50 here, $120 there. The kind of amounts that fall below the threshold of routine review. Over 23 months, those amounts added up to a little over $43,000. He had also been running a small side operation using my company's subcontractors. When jobs came in that were below a certain threshold, jobs I wasn't tracking closely, Derek had been billing clients under the Briggs name, collecting payment and routing it through a shell LLC that Sandra had incorporated 18 months ago. He had stolen from me, not dramatically, not in a single brazen act, but steadily and methodically, the way water finds its way through a crack in a foundation. Slowly, persistently, counting on me not to look. I thought about the Cabo vacation. I thought about the kitchen appliances. I thought about the truck. The hearing was held on a Thursday morning, in a courtroom that smelled of old carpet and industrial cleaning solution. Derek and Sandra sat at the plaintiff's table in careful, serious clothes. Their attorney was young and confident, and opened with a presentation designed to generate pity. He talked about a father in decline. He showed the court the intake notes from the ER that documented my speech impairment and left side weakness. He talked about a devoted son who had worked alongside his father for 11 years and had watched with growing alarm as the stroke had robbed his father of the judgment that had once made him great. Sandra took the stand first. She was composed, practiced. She painted a picture of a man who had been deteriorating gradually for over a year. She described arguments that hadn't happened. She described phone calls full of confusion that were fiction. She looked the judge directly in the eye and said that the business transfers had been made impulsively, recklessly, without the benefit of sound judgment, and that Derek was not trying to take anything from his father. He was trying to protect his father from himself. Then Derek took the stand. He was more convincing than I expected. He talked about the business with real knowledge, which of course he had. He talked about clients he had managed, contracts he had overseen, growth he had contributed to. He said he loved his father, and that this was the hardest thing he had ever done. He said he just wanted his dad to be safe. The judge, a woman with reading glasses and a patient expression, was listening carefully. I could see her leaning into the narrative. It was well constructed. It had emotional logic. It had a medical document with real letterhead. It had a medical document. 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 I stood up. The sound of my chair in the gallery was not dramatic. People turned slowly. Derek turned last. And when he saw me, the color left his face so completely and so suddenly that his attorney noticed and turned around too. I walked down the center aisle of that courtroom the way I used to walk onto a job site when something needed to be addressed directly. Without hesitation. Without apology. With the particular authority of a man who has made something from nothing and knows exactly what that cost. I was wearing a suit I had bought in 2019 for a contractor awards dinner. It still fit perfectly. I was walking without a cane. My left hand was not fully back, but you would not have known it from looking at me. Angela had worked me hard for 3 weeks. Your Honor, I said, I apologize for the timing of this, but I believe there's something the court needs to see before a decision is made. The judge looked at me over her reading glasses. You are the respondent? She asked. I am Walter Briggs, I said. Yes, ma'am. I built the business. This petition is asking you to put into receivership. I drove here this morning. I walked in without assistance. I prepared the remarks I'm about to make without the help of any other person. I am standing before you in complete possession of my faculties. And I would respectfully suggest that the evidence about to be presented will demonstrate that the only people in this courtroom with a judgment problem are the two sitting at that table. Derek was absolutely still. Sandra's expression had moved through shock and was now attempting to settle on something that looked like dignified concern, but wasn't quite getting there. Tom had been sitting quietly at the defense table. He rose and asked the court's permission to submit exhibits. The judge granted it. The first exhibit was 2 years of company financial records with every irregular transaction flagged and annotated. Tom walked the court through it methodically. $43,000. www. $43,000. He showed the routing. He showed the Shell, LLC. He showed Sandra's name on the incorporation documents. He showed the dates. The second exhibit was a report from a licensed forensic accountant, a woman with 20 years of experience who had spent 12 days on nothing but Briggs Custom Homes records and had signed her findings under oath. The third exhibit was something Tom had not told me about in advance. He had pulled Derek's personal phone records for the night of my stroke. He had subpoenaed them as part of the discovery process for the competency challenge, which had opened that door. The records showed that Derek's phone had received 3 calls from my number that evening. 3, not 2. The first was the one the paramedics had made from my phone. The second and third were the 2 calls I made personally. All 3 calls, the records showed, had been declined manually. Not missed. Declined. Someone had looked at the screen and pressed the button. The judge took off her reading glasses. She looked at Derek. Then she looked at Sandra. Then she looked at me. She asked Derek's attorney if he would like a recess to consult with his clients. The attorney said yes. The judge gave them 15 minutes. They did not come back from that recess with a revised strategy. They came back with a request to withdraw the petition. The judge denied the withdrawal. She wanted the record to reflect the full proceedings. She heard Tom's complete presentation. She reviewed the financial documentation on the bench. She asked Derek 3 questions directly, and I watched him try to answer them in a way that didn't dig the hole deeper, and I watched him fail at all 3. She dismissed the petition with prejudice. Then she referred the financial findings to the district attorney's office. Derek and Sandra walked out of that courthouse into a Tuesday morning that looked exactly like every other Tuesday morning, except that every financial shelter they had ever relied on had been permanently removed and a referral for fraud. The investigation was following them into the rest of their lives. I walked out the other door. Tom had a car waiting. We drove to a diner 2 miles from the courthouse and ordered coffee and eggs, and I ate the best breakfast I have had in recent memory. Derek did call me. Once. About 3 weeks after the hearing. He did not call to apologize. He called to tell me that the district attorney's office had contacted him and that he wanted to discuss coming to an agreement that would make the referral unnecessary. His voice had a quality I had not heard in it before. A careful, compressed quality. The voice of a man who has run out of the particular kind of confidence that comes from never having faced a real consequence. I listened to the full message. Then I played it again. Then I deleted it. What happened after that is the kind of thing that gets described in legal documents and accounting records, and I'll spare you the procedural details. What I can tell you is that Derek and Sandra's life contracted significantly and quickly. The house had to go. The truck went back. The side business dissolved. The legal bills, which they could no longer charge to anyone else, were substantial. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Sandra's friends were no longer quite as available as they once had been. The bachelorette weekend crowd, the dinner reservation crowd, the people who had been present when my phone went unanswered had quietly redistributed themselves toward people with more stable finances and less legal exposure. That is the particular cruelty of the social world my daughter-in-law had built her identity inside. It runs entirely on the perception of status, and the moment the perception shifts, the whole structure collapses faster than a wall with a compromised footer. I sold the house in November. All of it. The furniture Caroline had picked out, the tools in the garage, the whole structure that had held a life I no longer lived. I was not sentimental about it. I was grateful to it. There's a difference. Briggs Custom Homes still operates. The restructured entity is managed by a general manager I promoted from inside the company. A woman named Patricia who had been running crews for 8 years and knew the business as well as I did. She has no interest in my personal life, and I have no interest in drama, which makes us an excellent team. The business runs. The work continues. Good homes get built. I live now outside a small town in the hill country of central Vermont, which I chose because I had never been there and knew nobody there. which were both recommendations. The house is 140 years old and was in need of considerable repair, which suited me precisely. I have been working on it steadily since spring. There is a hardware store 12 minutes away where the owner knows my name and asks about the project. There is a diner where the coffee is good and the waitress brings it without asking by the third visit. There is a walking trail that follows a creek through birch trees, and in the late afternoon and autumn, the light comes through those trees in a way that does something to your chest, not the bad kind of something. My phone rings less than it used to. I have made peace with that. I was up on a ladder 2 weeks ago repointing the mortar on the chimney, which is something I probably shouldn't be doing at 64 with a partially recovered left hand, but I have never been good at being told what I shouldn't do. A woman walking a dog on the road below stopped and watched me work for a moment. "You built that?" she called up. "Working on it," I said. She said it was a beautiful house, and walked on. I stood up there with the trowel in my hand and looked out over the valley, and felt, with the particular clarity that only comes from having lost something and recovered it on your own terms. Exactly like myself. My son made a choice on a Thursday night in September. He picked up the phone, saw my name on the screen, and set it face down on a bar. He made that choice freely, with full knowledge of who was calling, and at least a reasonable guess about why. I made a choice too. I chose to survive. I chose to rebuild. I chose to take back every single thing that had been slowly taken from me with a patience so polished it had almost passed for trust. I have not spoken to my son since that phone call in December. I have not spoken to my daughter-in-law since the night she told me I was looking for attention. People ask me sometimes, well-meaning people, whether I regret the distance, whether I think about reconciliation, whether a father can truly walk away from a child. I think about it this way. A foundation is only as sound as what it's built on. When the material is compromised, when the integrity of the structure is gone, you do not patch over it and hope for the best. You dig it out. You start from solid ground. That is what I was taught by 31 years of building things meant to last. I am still building. Before you go, I want to hear from you. Has someone close to you ever made you feel like an inconvenience when you needed them most? Leave your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if this resonated with you, hit subscribe because I have more stories coming from people who chose themselves when no one else would. The next one will leave you speechless. Don't miss it.